We're back in concepts on my iPad, and we're going to be sketching navigation schemes. Now, navigation schemes really help you figure out which options your users can choose, the directions they can move in, and various parts of your product. It helps to define your navigation and the hierarchies within. I always do this at the beginning, and it really helps influence my user flows later and my sitemaps. Basically, this is the structure of your product. So what I like to do is, let's just title this quickly. So number 3 is a different type of flow, and we're going to call it structure. I like to call it structure. There we go. Okay. So number 3. Now, what we're trying to do here is we're really trying to think about navigation schemes. We're trying to think about the structure of our product. Sometimes I start thinking about the different types of screens that we actually do need. The one screen I know we need and that we've actually had sketched a couple times is our home screen. It's that main screen that somebody comes to. So when I think about the home screen, I'm thinking about maybe a welcome message on top. Maybe there's a profile image, just different things like that. I mentioned certain things like having product images at the top, so we can start thinking about that a bit more and what that could look like and what that experience can feel like. Maybe there's some deals at the bottom. But I do know that there is some sort of homepage. So we can kind of create a little icon here. Now, when I think about a user moving through this app, maybe they have a saved page as well. You know, sometimes we don't want to buy a product right away, or we're waiting for a sale and we just save it to some sort of wish list or something like that. So let's have a saved page. I think that's a really smart way. We're allowing users to keep track of their products. So maybe there's some text there. We have some sort of persistent UI or navigation at the bottom. And over here, it could be something really simple, like just a list of products that they have with some details. Maybe there's a call to action here that, add it to your cart and buy it right away. Maybe this is synced to some sort of notification, like when a product goes on sale. But we could start thinking about okay, we have a home page and maybe we have a saved page as well. I do know one thing we do need for sure, and that is a cart. And we need to make that much more prominent, because if a user adds something to a cart, we want that to be right at the bottom or right in a place where a user can see it and click it easily and notice that maybe there's a notification there. So let's create a little cart screen. And now I'm starting to think more about that hierarchy. I mentioned it a little bit in the last video, but maybe there's a button at the bottom. And if you notice, we've had a persistent bottom navigation over here and over here. And what we've done is we kind of switched that up a bit. At the bottom here, now we have a button that links them to the checkout process. And it'll allow them to easily tap that, especially on mobile. And especially using that kind of design pattern, we're allowing them to click easily and then putting the option to go backwards up top, which is a little bit more harder. But if a user is going to cart, my assumption at least is that they want to check out, review their products, check out quickly. So we want to make that experience really quick. So we have several navigation pieces over here. Cart could live in here as well. Let's draw a little cart. That's going to have to work. Okay, so now we know some basic navigation pieces that we like. Now we can start thinking about our home screen a little bit more. So if we redraw it here, see about making your sketches messy. I mean, it doesn't really matter about the details too much. Those start to kind of come naturally later on. If I start thinking about where these different things lead, I can start thinking about the structure of our whole product. So I know that there's a home page, and that's the first layer. This is layer 1. But on layer 2, I can actually go straight to a product page. So I know that's on layer 2. And from there, I can go into checkout. So I start thinking about different ways I can prioritize certain tasks that are really important to a user and really important to our business goals. Okay, there's our cart. But now we start thinking about that. We can also start thinking about, well, what happens after this scenario? A user has gone through the checkout process and you get that nice, happy screen, and their item has shipped. Well, don't you often keep track of your orders? I know I do, but we can test that assumption later. Maybe there's a different navigation piece. We talked about a profile, the little profile button at the top, and maybe that leads to like a user settings page or like your current orders, but doesn't seem like that is prioritized, and maybe that should be prioritized. So maybe we could create an order screen. So if we go back up, maybe there is an order screen. And let's draw that up just quickly. Right here, we can start thinking about maybe you can search your existing orders. I'm not sure if that's a feature we would build right away, but we want to build like that the minimum viable product, the pieces, the features that users really want right away. So if we think about what you would see on an order screen, you'd probably see your products that you ordered, their details, and maybe the status. There's multiple statuses that we need to think about, and this is what I mean when we're talking about the different requirements that just naturally surface when we start thinking about different components on a page. Right here, this could be a product that has been shipped, and there's like a map with a tracker that's like pulsing. You can start thinking about things like motion a bit. Maybe over here, this is a delivered one. So we could start thinking that, we have maybe a fourth navigation piece. I would argue that, your search is a part of your navigation because it's a very prominent feature for a product like this. Being able to search and find products is so important. So from here, what I would naturally do is I would start kind of, sketching a little bit more screens, thinking about how these different screens link together. I would actually start building some sort of like mini sitemap. So I know that home is like my ground zero. And from home, if I move over, I get items, the product description. I can get to, what else can I get to? I can get to like a category possibly. So let's write that in. And there's other things like, okay, so this product is about personalization. Maybe there's like an interesting portion about like interest. Maybe that's front and center on something like a product like this. So maybe there's like, I don't know, a component around interest. So I start thinking about these types of navigation trees. We can also think about saved as well. Like we created a saved page. So if I make a little box here for saved and I go down, I can start thinking about where saved actually leads. I know I have products. I can go to an item description page, and that obviously can lead to the cart. This isn't an entirely complex product, but it's a lot of different ways you can find certain pages. From saved, I could probably go directly to a checkout. That would be awesome, especially if something comes up as like on sale or like a flash sale. That would prompt a lot of people to probably just bite the bullet and buy what's in their wish list. Maybe we have other items that are relevant to them and whatever's in their wish list. Maybe if they have something in relation to like shoes, maybe there's another pair of shoes that we can kind of push to them and hopefully they'll choose those pairs. It really depends. So we can start thinking about this navigation tree, which will definitely affect how we build out our sitemaps. So that's how you can take an approach at sketching navigation schemes. It's a really easy way to just kind of get that overview of your application. I mean, we just kind of scratched the surface over here, but I urge you to kind of go back. You don't necessarily need to copy exactly what I did here. But like I said before, use what you think is best, whether that's like paper, do it digitally, refine them, ask questions constantly. Never stop asking questions because you'll find different routes like we did. And that's navigation schemes. Hey, and welcome back. We are going to be Talking about sketching screen states. Now, I love sketching screen states. This focuses on drawing the entire screen or different interactions. An example is a user comes to a search page, clicks on a search bar, an overlay pops up, they type, get suggested searches. You get the point. We start thinking about those little micro interactions as well. That's the fun part too. I spent a lot of my time actually drawing these. So let's go back to our client. Let's think about something that we can work on. I kind of gave a little example about searching for a product, and I think that's a good way to kind of start. Let's think about our home screen just a little bit more. So let's just title that. And what I'm going to do is, well, you'll notice that I'm not really writing any annotations because they're kind of illegible. But since we're doing this together, get out your sketch pad, keep on going. You know what I'm drawing, and we don't really need them in this case. So if I start to think about this in a little bit more detail, I start to think about, well, what are the kind of like the different types of features and different types of elements that this page should have. We talked about a profile image. We have a search here as well. And we could start thinking about, well, we created a saved page. How does a user save an item? So we have our item here. Maybe it's a little heart on each image. I don't know. I kind of like that. I start to think about different things like the user can see in relation to that image, that type of content that's really important. So if we zoom in, I start thinking about like the product name, start thinking about like maybe there's the price, maybe there's some product information if that's useful. I'm not sure. Is there a button? Can users click this whole section? Is it like a card? That's really going to be up to you and what you think is best for users. Typically, I don't like placing like little buttons over here and just limiting a user, because like on mobile, you want to tap larger surface areas. You got to make your buttons much larger too. In this case, I probably will use like a card. I'm not sure just yet, but something to start thinking about. So this probably like this interaction, when I'm thinking about it, maybe it's a carousel. So when the user kind of swipes left, what will happen is this will go there and we'll kind of start getting images that go left to right, which is pretty cool. So those will go left to right. But let's think a little bit more about this home screen. I mentioned like thinking about interest. We can start thinking about like ways that fits into the app. Maybe there's like a interest title and like a see all thing where they can go find more interest or maybe edit their current interest. Maybe they'll see items in relation to certain categories and they can click on them and put them into a different funnel. So I'm starting to think a little bit more detail in terms of like what's on the page, what I need to account for when I'm building a product. And that's really helpful, especially with screen states. So we did talk about search. So what happens if you actually click this search over here? Let's draw a state. When somebody clicks a search, I'm thinking like an overlay will pop up. What does that interaction look like? So let's just start ground zero, number one. We'll just name it overlay. Maybe an overlay pops from top to bottom. There's a little X with the search. We're on mobile, so we have to remember that, that there's a keyboard here. It's a lot of rectangles. We also need to remember that these keyboards have some sort of large button that can be used as like an enter. So that's an alternate way for them to select something. So if they're writing something in there, if they're typing something in there, we need to start thinking about what happens. So once they start typing, we'll stay in the same screen. Everything up here will stay the same. But now we'll start getting some type ahead result. Here, let's zoom in so we can write a little bit more neatly. So if I start typing in something like book, we're going to change our pen weight just a little bit more. And we can bold it and say something like books for 8+. And that's a great way just to kind of like make the user's life a little bit easier. Maybe they're looking for a bookshelf, so we can do the same there where we just bring that down and it'll be like shelf. It'll just finish off the rest. So it's just kind of auto-suggesting, auto-completing for them. So we start thinking about those types of elements that we're going to need. Obviously, this kind of stays persistent. And we'll start thinking about, well, what happens then? Maybe it's like a 1.1. But the next step is that they would go straight to search results. Now, what do search results look like? Maybe there's like a back button. Maybe we got our search at the top, whatever we wrote. Maybe we have some information about the amount of results. I don't know, maybe there's a filter up here. Let's draw a little filter icon. Not the best, but it works. And they get the results here. Now, here we start thinking about, well, what do they see? What can they interact with? I know that they could be, if we split these up, maybe they seem more like cards like before, so they can tap the whole thing and go straight into like a product page that we've been sketching a bunch lately. But, there's probably a couple other things that we can pull out here. Maybe we have that heart and users can go straight to our saved page, whatever that may look like. I started off with understanding that I'm going to be creating an interaction for this certain flow, searching for some sort of product. And I asked myself the question, well, what comes next? And now I'm asking the question of, well, what alternate scenarios are there? So there's a couple different scenarios here. Users can, from here, we have different flows. Users can go see a product. Users can save their products to a saved page. Users also can enter a new search. They can go all the way back. And users could even filter. Users could also kind of like just abandon the search if they want to. Maybe we have a persistent like navigation at the bottom. So there's so many different scenarios. Like what happens with filters? Maybe it's like another overlay. It comes down from the top, nice little animation. And, I'm starting to think about these animations a little bit more, these micro interactions, because if I leave them all the way to the end of the project, they're not going to look good. They're going to look amateur, and you should really incorporate motion early on. They really help a lot with different types of things like feedback and understanding the state of a screen. And we're going to do a whole lesson on motion later, but it's great to just start thinking about it right now. So this is like our filters. We're just gonna call it fill. And now I can start thinking about the content here. I mean, now we're branching out, and that's totally fine. Sometimes I don't branch out. Sometimes I just kind of stop here and I start refining this kind of flow. But it's pretty cool to start thinking about all the different types of things that you're gonna need to account for, like the different types of UI elements, different types of content. So if I think about filtering for a product like this, if there's a title, maybe people are going to want to filter for something like price. So that may be an option. Maybe it's by customer review, or maybe it's by like newest items. Maybe there's another section where it's by review, solely by review. So we can start thinking about what we're going to need to actually implement moving forward. It's going to really help us in the future. And this is why we actually just kind of sketch and, just do it quickly. So take some time to really go through that. Like I said, don't get bogged down by the details. Like you could tell that we just went through it really quickly and we learned a lot about what possibly could be in our application. We created a bunch of screens and we have a really good like jumping off point. But now we can take these, use them for like user flows, use them for sitemaps, and even start building wireframes like ASAP. The whole point of sketching is to just be lean, be agile, and don't get bogged down by the details. Ignore things like dribble or where you see like really high definition like sketches. Just go for it, jump right in. And that's it for sketching screen states. So we're back again in concepts, and we're just gonna go through some quick tips just to kind of wrap everything up in terms of sketching. So let's just give ourselves a little title here. I'm gonna repeat a couple of things that I've been talking about, but I really want you all to understand how important they actually are. Number one is don't worry about being messy. Go, jump right in, ask yourself those questions, and just keep going. Like you saw, I created a home screen pretty quickly, and I started understanding that, maybe we do need these elements here. They're going to probably be useful. And I started learning about what content I can actually get from just like a quick sketch like that. And from there, we can actually go in and start refining that a bit more. Add icons, figuring out maybe that's an avatar, figuring out what type of information goes in here. Like we found out that we needed a heart. And maybe we need a price tag. Most definitely need a price tag, but this is the kind of stuff that it's just a natural progression. And you don't worry about drawing something like this, because eventually it's going to get to something even better and to the product that we eventually build. Don't worry about being messy. Like I said, be lean, agile, sketch quickly, and save yourself some time instead of worrying about the details. The next tip is, it takes a little practice, but only a little. Think about it as building blocks. All you need are some squares, rectangles, maybe circles, and you can build a fairly decent UI like we've done before. Like our cart screen is, just an X, whatever text we have there. We have a square, some lines, another square. To us, we understand what we're building here. We can refine that if we're going to present it to teammates. We got a fairly good understanding of what we need to build a screen like this. Don't worry about it too much. If you want to have a little bit of practice, like you can go and open an app that you love or a website that you love and, try just sketching that out, just using some shapes or like some basic type. And eventually you'll just develop your own type of system for sketching. And there really is no wrong or right way to do it. It's just whatever is going to work for you. Next tip, keep your sketches safe. Buy yourself a folder, please. I mean, if you're doing it digitally, that's great too, because like services like this will allow you to like export it in JPEG or whatever file format. It doesn't really matter for sketches like this. If you're using paper, store it in a folder, scan it right away, take a picture, please, because I can't count how many times I've lost sketches that I really needed or I really liked, and sometimes you lose details. Just remember, keep them safe. Always be prepared. Keep a sketch pad near you, a pencil, a pen with you. On my desk at home, I always have my sketchbook. It's a dotted line sketchbook, so it's really easy for drawing wireframes and stuff like that. So keep something with you if you like to draw digitally, like on an iPad, or if you have a tablet that you draw on, like a Wacom tablet. Keep that by your side because, you never know when an idea is going to come. You just never know when you need to sketch. Keep it by your side. Another thing I like to do is I like to hang my sketches up. So like say if I have some sort of like board beside me or a wall, I just like to hang up my sketches for some inspiration, and then I just write additional notes. If I'm working from home, I have my whiteboard that I hang up, and it serves as a daily reminder just so I can like see what I've been thinking about. I can maybe scrap some ideas. I can maybe take this new idea that I have or this old idea I have, and maybe something else comes from it because I've taken some time to just take some breathing room. Just put it up for yourself. And if you're working with teams, they help as well because other people can kind of get into it and they can start to provide some valuable insight. You want to keep people on your team participating. So that's the best thing I've always found is just put your sketches up, share them. And that leads me to like my next tip over here. My next tip is to kind of communicate. Just please communicate. Don't hide these gems that you're making. And I call them gems because like every product starts from something like this. That may not seem true, but that's what really is the skeleton of your product. They'll always start from like a messy sketch. So share them with people because this is a collaborative process. Share them with your team. Talk to every teammate. It doesn't matter. They'll always provide valuable insights. We talked a little bit about like a certain feature over here where there was going to be a carousel. We'll just quickly draw it again. And if a user swiped left, the new image would come in. And if I were to develop a feature like this or build a feature like this, first person I would talk to would be a developer, and I would like to understand, is this feasible for our timeline? what's the best way to do it. And you can have those conversations early on. Next thing I like to do is I mentioned it briefly about like putting your sketches up, but some people like to get a big whiteboard and sketch on a whiteboard. And that's totally fine too. I love sketching on whiteboards. Now, it's very collaborative and it's easy to involve team members in this discussion. And, when you're just drawing screens, everyone can kind of just come in, point certain things out. Because it's marker, nobody really gets tied to the details. Everyone's thinking about like the overall flow. You have so much space. Sometimes you'll be surprised at how fast you can actually fill that up with your whole team. And what I also like to do is I like to pin my sketches there as well. So maybe they have some sort of relation to a certain screen. It's a good jumping off point for yourself so you can kind of go back to your desk or wherever you're working and start thinking about different things that could relate. And one of the last tips I have, and I do this fairly often, sometimes I'll grab a sketch. So if I have our search experience, like so, it's easy to just sketch these out, but sometimes you don't necessarily get like a feel for the product. That's natural. It's because it's on paper or it's just static. And sometimes you want to understand, like, how does that feel when a user actually clicks this? So what you could do is you can export like individual frames, any which way you want to do it. Like you can export this whole thing here in concepts, this whole canvas, and you can kind of duplicate it and crop it to crop out each individual frame. And you can bring it into Figma and link it together in a prototype. And bam, you have like something super simple, and it'll give you a little bit more context on how it will actually work in the digital product. So sometimes I'll do that, or I'll scan in a sketch, and that will really help me to figure that out if things actually work while I'm tapping it on a mobile screen. It'll also give me a sense on, these elements need to be bigger than I thought. Maybe it's not going to work here. So like on a home screen, we thought about things like the little hearts, but maybe we'll realize that that's not really feasible for a user to tap. Maybe it is for larger images on a mobile screen, but maybe if we're thinking about smaller ones, maybe we leave that out there because it's a little confusing and a user may go to tap that and then actually tap into the image when they didn't want to. Where do they go? They go to like that product description page that we've been talking so much about. All these different tips are going to really help you create a much better user experience. It's going to help you like drive that communication throughout the whole team, create that collaborative process. At the end of the day, it's going to make you a better designer. It's going to make your users happy. So follow these tips, follow that process we talked about earlier in the lesson, and you're well on your way to sketching some amazing interactions and different types of flows.